When the news spread that strange ships had appeared just beyond the edge of the solar system, humanity was shocked. For decades, people had looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone. Movies, books, and theories had filled minds with ideas of alien visitors. But no one expected the real thing to happen so suddenly. The first ships were huge and elegant, shaped like long silver arcs that shimmered against the blackness of space. They moved slowly, as if carefully announcing their presence. Rather than attacking or hiding, every telescope and satellite on Earth turned toward them. Recording their movements in real time, the world watched together, millions of people glued to their screens, hearts racing with a mix of fear and excitement. Governments tried to act calm, but behind closed doors there was chaos. Scientists rushed to decode the strange signals being sent by the alien ships. The signals were rhythmic, almost like music, repeating patterns that seemed friendly. It didn't take long for linguists and mathematicians to agree. It was a greeting, a deliberate attempt to communicate. For the first time in history, humanity wasn't looking at the stars and guessing they were being spoken to directly. The alien fleet stopped near Jupiter, staying at a respectful distance. It was as if they didn't want to frighten Earth, giving humans time to respond. Space agencies from every major nation came together to form a single contact group. There were tense meetings, sleepless nights, and heated debates about how to answer. Some wanted to show strength, others wanted to show peace. But everyone understood that this was a moment that would define human history. After weeks of careful preparation, humanity sent a response. A simple broadcast in multiple languages, combined with mathematical patterns and images of Earth. They sent music too, classical, folk, even recordings of children laughing. The idea was to show that humanity was alive. Curious and friendly, the aliens replied almost immediately. Their response more complex, filled with sounds and images that no one could fully understand yet. But one thing was clear. They were inviting humanity to talk. The decision was made to send a ship, not a warship, but a diplomatic vessel filled with scientists, linguists, and ambassadors from many nations. It launched from Earth with a symbolic message painted across its hull. "We come in peace," written in dozens of languages. As the ship approached the alien fleet, the crew described what they saw through their windows. Enormous ships, smooth and shining, each larger than any human spacecraft ever built. They hung in space like silent giants, their surfaces covered in glowing patterns that shifted like waves. When the human ship came close, a gentle beam of light surrounded it, pulling it toward one of the alien vessels, not forcefully, but like an invisible hand guiding a guest inside the alien ship. Humans experienced something they would never forget. The air was breathable, the temperature comfortable, and the architecture unlike anything seen before. Walls seemed to flow like liquid glass. Forming shapes as needed, aliens appeared, tall, thin, with luminous skin and large, calm eyes. They didn't speak with mouths, but through a blend of sound and projected images that floated in the air. The humans responded with translators and gestures, slowly building a basic way to communicate. There was no hostility, only curiosity and a sense of ceremony. The aliens introduced themselves as representatives of the Galactic Concord, a massive alliance of species spread across the stars. They had discovered Earth centuries ago, but had waited for the right moment to make contact. Now that humanity had reached a certain level of technology and space exploration, the Concord believed it was time to welcome them. The humans listened in awe as they learned that the galaxy was full of life, trade routes, shared knowledge, and vast cities on distant worlds. To the aliens, Earth was a young civilization finally stepping into a wider universe. They called humans newcomers, a term that was not meant to insult but to describe their recent arrival on the galactic stage. The Concord offered Earth a place as an observer in their Senate, where dozens of species met to discuss galactic affairs. It was a great honor, even if it came with limited power at first. Human leaders agreed, eager to learn and avoid conflict. They believed this was the beginning of a new era of peace, knowledge, and cooperation. People on Earth celebrated, cities lit up with fireworks, and news broadcasts described the event as the dawn of the cosmic age. Children dreamed of visiting alien worlds, while scientists imagined exchanging ideas with other species, but not everyone saw it the same way. Some military leaders worried about Earth's vulnerability, noting that the alien ships could have destroyed humanity in seconds if they wanted to. Some historians warned that being treated as a newcomer could place Earth in a weaker political position. But for the moment, excitement overshadowed doubt. The world united in a way it hadn't in centuries, facing something far greater than itself. As the human ambassadors took their first steps into the Galactic Senate, they were greeted with polite applause and curious stares. Species of all shapes and colors observed them like older siblings watching a younger one join the family. The aliens saw humanity as fresh, inexperienced, and eager to learn. What they didn't know, what even humans didn't fully remember, was that Earth was not as new as it seemed. Beneath its blue skies and deep oceans lay secrets far older than any star map in the Concord's archives. The first contact was warm and respectful, but it was only the beginning of a story that would shake the galaxy to its core. When the human delegation finally entered the Galactic Senate for the first time, they were nervous but excited. Their ship had traveled through hyperspace corridors guided by Concord vessels, passing stars and strange cosmic sights that no human had ever witnessed before. Outside the ship's windows, glowing rings marked the entry into the central galactic hub, a massive structure that floated in space like a shining star itself. It was larger than any city on Earth, a cluster of stations, domes, and bridges wrapped around a calm blue star. This place was known as the Concord Core, the heart of interstellar diplomacy, trade, and law. As their ship approached the docking station, humans saw fleets from dozens of alien civilizations. Some ships were sleek and elegant, others were bulky and covered in strange symbols, and some looked almost alive, their surfaces shifting like the skin of a creature. Everywhere they looked, they saw signs of technology far beyond human understanding. Robotic drones flew between ships, beams of light moved like invisible roads, and giant transparent tubes carried streams of glowing liquid that powered the entire station. For the first time, humanity truly realized how small and young they were compared to the rest of the galaxy. When the delegation entered the Senate building, they were guided through long hallways made of shimmering material that changed color with every step. Alien guards stood silently, wearing uniforms with glowing crests that represented their species. The Senate chamber itself was breathtaking. A vast circular hall filled with floating platforms where each species had their place. Some delegates floated in bubbles of water, others were surrounded by glowing energy fields, and some sat on mechanical thrones that hovered in the air. At the center of the chamber was a giant sphere of light that pulsed slowly like a beating heart, symbolizing unity and life. When the humans stepped onto their small platform, hundreds of alien eyes or their equivalents turned toward them. They felt like students entering a classroom where everyone else had been learning for centuries. The speaker of the Concord, a tall being made of translucent energy, welcomed humanity with a voice that echoed directly into their minds. It spoke of cooperation, peace, and the promise of shared knowledge. The humans replied politely, expressing their gratitude and their wish to learn. As observers, the human delegation had no real power yet. They couldn't vote on decisions or influence policies, but they were allowed to attend meetings, access libraries, and speak in discussions when invited. Other species treated them kindly but with a certain distance. As if talking to younger relatives, some offered trade agreements. Others asked curious questions about Earth's culture. But few saw humanity as an equal. They were the newcomers, the ones who had just stepped through the door into a much larger world. Back on Earth, people followed every broadcast of these events. For the first time, alien faces appeared on news channels, their expressions strange yet fascinating. Some humans celebrated, proud that their species had finally joined the galactic community. Others felt uneasy, wondering if Earth would lose its identity in this massive system. Still, the general feeling was hope, a belief that humanity had taken a great step forward. Meanwhile, the delegation began to explore the Concord Core in their free time. They visited alien markets where goods from thousands of worlds were traded. There were glowing fruits that floated in the air, machines that turned sound into physical shapes, and creatures that communicated through light patterns. Human scientists were amazed, taking notes and scanning everything they could. They spent hours in the great libraries, which were not made of books but of energy crystals that stored memories and information. When a human touched one, visions of entire worlds filled their minds, showing histories and knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. But beneath all this wonder, there was also a quiet feeling of being underestimated. Some alien delegates made jokes, harmless on the surface but carrying a tone of superiority. They referred to humans as young minds, fresh thinkers, or bright children. Human diplomats smiled politely, knowing they were being watched closely. They understood that earning respect in this place would not happen overnight. During Senate sessions, humans observed how power truly worked. The older species dominated the conversations, their alliances and rivalries shaping decisions. They spoke in complex political language, often referencing events and treaties that were older than human civilization itself. The human delegation sometimes struggled to keep up, relying on translators and advisors to understand the full context. Still, they took careful notes, learning silently. Understanding where opportunities might appear in the future, the Concord itself treated Earth kindly. But with clear limits, they offered basic trade routes, shared minor technologies, and allowed Earth limited access to the hyperspace network. To the Concord, Earth was like a small village joining a great empire. Welcome but not yet trusted with major responsibilities, humanity accepted this role for now. Knowing they had to learn and adapt before pushing further, they worked on improving their ships, their communication systems, and their understanding of galactic laws. As months passed, the humans became a familiar sight in the Senate. Some aliens grew genuinely curious, asking to visit Earth or exchange cultural programs. Human music became surprisingly popular among a few species who had never heard anything like it before. Art exchanges began, and scientists from both sides started small joint projects. Friendships slowly formed. Not many, but enough to create hope for the future. However, while humans were adapting, something unexpected began to happen back on Earth. Old ruins, strange signals, and forgotten records started to draw attention. Hidden beneath centuries of dust were clues that Earth's history might be far more complex than anyone had believed. The human delegation in space didn't know it yet, but the story of their people was about to change everything. The galaxy saw Earth as a humble newcomer, eager to learn and grow, but humanity's true past, buried deep under oceans and sands, waited patiently to be uncovered. And when that moment arrived, the balance of the galaxy would never be the same again. Months after humanity's entry into the galactic Concord, life on Earth had slowly adjusted to this new reality. People had become used to seeing alien faces on news channels, trade ships orbiting the planet, and glowing Concord beacons floating near the moon. Scientists were working side by side with alien engineers, translators were improving daily, and children in schools were already learning basic galactic symbols along with their regular lessons. Everything seemed peaceful and full of promise. But far away from the shining stations of the Concord core, something strange was happening in a quiet observatory on the far side of the moon. A group of human researchers detected a weak signal coming from deep space. At first, they thought it was just background noise, the usual static of the universe, but the signal kept repeating. It was faint, almost like a whisper in a storm, but it followed a clear pattern. The scientists began recording it carefully, feeding the data into powerful computers. What they found shocked them. The structure of the signal wasn't random. It contained mathematical sequences that were almost identical to some ancient human carvings found on stones thousands of years old. The news spread quickly through scientific channels, reaching universities, research labs, and eventually the human delegation at the Concord core. No alien civilization claimed the signal. When the Concord was asked about it, their response was puzzling. They admitted they had detected similar signals centuries ago, but had always dismissed them as artifacts from some forgotten extinct species. To them, it was just cosmic background chatter. Nothing important, but to the humans it was personal. It felt familiar in a way that was hard to explain. Archaeologists and historians on Earth began digging through old archives, searching for connections. They found ancient tablets from forgotten civilizations, cave drawings, and symbols carved into desert rocks that matched elements of the signal. It was as if the message had been calling to humanity across time, waiting for them to listen again. This discovery set off a wave of excitement and confusion. Had humans received this signal in the past without understanding it? Or had their ancestors been the ones to send it long ago? As more observatories pointed their instruments toward the source, they realized the signal wasn't coming from within the Concord's core territories. It originated from the outer rim, a distant part of the galaxy far beyond Concord control. This region was known for ancient ruins, lost civilizations, and strange anomalies. Many Concord species avoided it, calling it the Silent Edge, a place where old ghosts of the galaxy slept. But to the humans, it was like hearing a voice from a forgotten relative calling from afar. In hidden research centers on Earth, cryptographers worked day and night to decode the signal. They filtered noise, adjusted frequencies, and ran simulations, slowly revealing fragments of what seemed like a map. It pointed to a cluster of stars arranged in a pattern that didn't match any known navigation charts. Even more shocking was that parts of the message seemed to be in a structure similar to ancient human languages. Not modern ones, but those spoken long before recorded history. The scientists could hardly believe it. How could a signal coming from the far edge of the galaxy contain patterns connected to humanity's distant past? The human government debated how to handle the situation. Some wanted to share everything with the conquered immediately, hoping for joint exploration. Others were cautious, fearing that revealing too much could make humanity look unpredictable or even dangerous. In the end, they decided to study the signal quietly first, keeping most of their findings secret. They formed a special team of historians, linguists, scientists, and military advisors to investigate every detail. Meanwhile, strange stories began to surface from archaeological sites on Earth. Teams digging in deserts, mountains, and deep underwater ruins started finding symbols and structures that matched the signal's patterns exactly. In one forgotten cave system, explorers discovered a massive stone arch covered in carvings that glowed faintly when exposed to certain frequencies. In another location deep under the Atlantic Ocean, sonar scans revealed a perfectly symmetrical structure buried beneath layers of sediment. It was as if someone long ago had left breadcrumbs scattered across Earth. Pointing toward the stars at the conquered core, human delegates grew more curious and began asking quiet questions. Some alien species laughed politely, saying that humans were chasing myths. Others grew uneasy, warning them that digging too deeply into the outer rim could awaken things best left alone. One elder alien diplomat whispered to a human ambassador, "Some doors once opened can never be closed again." But the humans couldn't stop now. The signal had awakened something inside them, a deep sense of connection they didn't fully understand. After months of analysis, the decoding team made a breakthrough. They managed to reconstruct a part of the signal into a holographic image. It showed a star map that zoomed into a specific system on the edge of the galaxy. Then, in the middle of the projection, appeared a symbol that shocked everyone who saw it. It was a near-perfect match to a symbol carved on a massive stone slab, found decades earlier in a remote desert on Earth. The slab had been dated to tens of thousands of years before any known civilization. It had always been a mystery, and now it was speaking again through the stars. The realization hit the team like a wave. This signal wasn't random. It wasn't from strangers. It was connected to humanity itself. Some believed it was a message left by an ancient human civilization that had once reached the stars and vanished. Others thought it might be a warning, a call to return, or something even more mysterious. No one had answers yet, but one thing was clear. Humanity was no longer just the newcomer. They were being called to remember something they had forgotten, something that the conquered had overlooked for centuries. Plans began to form for an expedition, not an official Concord mission, but a human-led journey to follow the signal to its source. It would be risky. The outer rim was full of unknown dangers, but the temptation was too strong. If the answers to humanity's forgotten past were waiting there, they had to go. What started as a faint whisper in space had now grown into a thunderous question, echoing in human minds. Who had sent the signal? And why did it feel like it was meant for them all along? The signal had changed everything. What started as a small mystery had grown into a global obsession. Governments, scientists, and explorers were now working together like never before. Everyone wanted to understand what the message truly meant. Deep beneath deserts, under oceans, and inside forgotten mountains, archaeologists were making discoveries that didn't fit into any known timeline. It was as if the Earth itself was slowly waking up, revealing secrets it had held for thousands of years. One of the most shocking discoveries happened in a remote desert, where an old archaeological team had once found strange carvings decades ago. New scanning technology revealed an underground structure larger than anyone had imagined. A network of perfectly shaped tunnels and chambers that stretched for kilometers. The walls were made of a smooth material that was not stone, not metal, but something entirely unknown. When researchers touched it, it hummed softly like it was alive. Inside these chambers were carvings that matched the signal perfectly. Spirals, star maps, and symbols that no known human culture should have been able to make at that time. As news of this spread, more sites began to reveal similar patterns. In the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, a buried monolith was discovered, covered in markings that glowed faintly under specific frequencies. Deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, divers reached the top of a colossal structure shaped like a star. Every beam of that star pointed to a different region of the sky. Together, these locations formed a map identical to the one decoded from the signal. It was no longer just a theory. Humanity had left clues for itself long ago, waiting to be found when the time was right. Historians and linguists worked day and night to decode the ancient markings. What they uncovered was beyond belief. They found records of a civilization that had existed on Earth long before the rise of any known empires. A civilization that had reached the stars, built vast networks, and then mysteriously disappeared. These weren't alien writings, they were human. The same genetic markers, the same biological traces, everything pointed to one shocking truth. Humanity had once been a spacefaring civilization ages ago, and then had forgotten it. This discovery shook the world. It wasn't just a scientific breakthrough, it was an emotional one. People around the globe began to question everything they knew about their history. Old legends and myths were re-examined. Stories of star gods, sky travelers, and shining cities were suddenly taken more seriously. Perhaps these were not just stories, but fading memories passed down through generations after a great fall. The conquered at first didn't know how to react. When human scientists presented some of their findings to a small group of alien historians, the reaction was disbelief mixed with nervous curiosity. The conquered had always believed humans were newcomers, an intelligent but young species who had recently joined the stars. The idea that humanity might have once been ancient spacefarers older than many conquered civilizations was almost unthinkable. Some alien scholars dismissed it. Others demanded to see more evidence. A few, however, began quietly searching their own archives, looking for forgotten records of contact with ancient humans. On Earth, excavation teams made another stunning find. Deep within one of the underground structures was a sealed chamber that had never been opened before. Inside was a device unlike anything seen in modern times. It was small enough to fit in a person's arms but gave off energy readings far beyond human technology. When activated, it projected a three-dimensional image of the galaxy, not as it was now, but as it had been hundreds of thousands of years ago. It highlighted certain regions with glowing trails showing trade routes, colonies, and something that looked like a capital world at the center of it all. That world was Earth. The scientists realized they were looking at the remnants of a lost empire, a human empire that had stretched across the stars long before current history. The device's record suggested that this empire had been technologically advanced, stable and powerful, and then something had happened. The recordings ended abruptly, the glowing trails went dark, the map slowly faded, leaving only Earth glowing faintly, like a candle in the dark. This raised more questions than answers. How could such a mighty civilization vanish so completely? Why had the knowledge been lost? What had forced humanity to start over from scratch? Some thought it was a war. Others believed it was a natural cosmic disaster. A few whispered about something worse, something that had made the ancient humans deliberately erase their own legacy to protect future generations. In the Galactic Senate, whispers began to spread. Alien ambassadors exchanged worried glances during meetings. The conquered had records of several ancient collapses of other civilizations. But nothing like this. If humanity truly was part of the galaxy's ancient past, then their return could shift the balance of power completely. Already, some species began treating humans more cautiously, no longer just as naive newcomers, but as unpredictable heirs to something they didn't fully understand. Meanwhile, ordinary people on Earth were experiencing a wave of cultural awakening. Artists, writers, and musicians were inspired by the discoveries, creating new works that mixed ancient styles with futuristic visions. Children grew up dreaming not just of exploring space, but of reclaiming a forgotten legacy. Humanity's identity was changing. No longer just a young species reaching for the stars, but descendants of something vast and powerful. The special research teams continued their work in secret. Not everything they found was shared with the conquered. Some of the deeper chambers contained records written in strange hybrid languages that seemed to be warnings. They spoke of the silence beyond the edge, of the return of the builders, and the cycle that must not repeat. These fragments hinted that the fall of the ancient human empire had not been an accident. It had been planned. One particular inscription gave chills to everyone who translated it. It said, "When the stars call again, the sleepers will awaken, and the forgotten will rise to many." This felt like more than just poetry. It felt like a message across time, left for the future humans who would rediscover their past. By the time the fourth year of humanity's presence in the conquered Senate began, it was clear that things had changed forever. The galaxy no longer saw Earth the same way. The humans themselves no longer saw their history the same way. Something deep had shifted. The forgotten legacy had begun to surface, and with it came both wonder and unease. Somewhere out there in the vastness of space, the truth waited, and humanity was now on the path to finding it, whether the galaxy was ready or not. As humanity's forgotten past slowly came to light, the atmosphere in the galactic concord began to change at first. Most alien civilizations treated the discoveries with polite curiosity, but soon whispers turned into real concern. Meetings in the Senate became colder. Private discussions between alien ambassadors grew more intense, and intelligence networks started to focus on Earth in ways they hadn't before. What had once been seen as a harmless newcomer was starting to look like something far more unpredictable. Human research teams continued to explore the ruins and signals in secret. Their discoveries were carefully controlled. Not everything was shared with the conquered. This quiet secrecy did not go unnoticed. Alien intelligence agencies began intercepting human transmissions, monitoring movements of ships, and even planting informants in trade routes. Some species worried that humanity was preparing something behind the scenes. Others feared that the ancient technology being uncovered on Earth could give humans an advantage that no one else had. The first real moment of tension came when a small Concord patrol detected a human science vessel near a restricted zone. This zone was known to contain the remains of an ancient station buried inside an asteroid field. For centuries, the Conquered had labeled the place as dangerous and off-limits due to unstable structures, but the humans had gone there quietly, following data decoded from one of their ancient devices. When the patrol confronted the human ship, the crew claimed it was just conducting a mapping mission, but their equipment suggested otherwise. They had scanning devices designed to detect old power cores. The patrol reported the incident to the Senate, and suddenly humans found themselves at the center of heated debates. Alien delegates demanded explanations, accusing humanity of hiding motives. Human ambassadors responded with calm and politeness, saying they were only seeking knowledge about their own history. But trust had already started to crack behind closed doors. Alien strategists began drawing up reports with titles like Potential Human Ascendancy and Strategic Containment Measures. Meanwhile, on Earth, human leaders were also becoming more cautious. They understood that their discoveries had placed them in a dangerous position. They were no longer just explorers. They were the descendants of something ancient, and the galaxy was watching them closely. Secret councils were formed to decide what to share and what to keep hidden. Military organizations quietly increased funding for ship production, satellite networks, and defense systems. Official speeches spoke of peace and cooperation, but in underground bunkers, plans were being written for a future that might not be peaceful at all. In the Conquered Core, alien spies began noticing small but meaningful changes. Human ships were traveling deeper into unexplored space. Their routes often matched the star maps discovered in the ancient ruins. Their technology was improving rapidly within just a few years. Human engines became faster, shields more efficient, and AI systems more advanced. Many alien civilizations had needed centuries to reach similar progress. This sudden leap caused unease. Was humanity advancing on its own, or were they unlocking ancient technologies piece by piece? A group of alien analysts presented a report to the Senate Security Council. The report stated that if humanity continued to grow at this pace, within 2 decades they could become a major power, not because of numbers or fleets, but because of knowledge. Old knowledge that no one else had. Some called it paranoia, others called it foresight, but the seed of suspicion had been planted deep. Among the Concord members, reactions were mixed. Some species genuinely liked humans and believed that cooperation would lead to mutual growth. They saw the rediscovery of humanity's legacy as an opportunity for all. Others were fearful, remembering old legends about powerful civilizations that had risen quickly and then caused destruction. They worried that history might repeat itself. A few even suggested putting restrictions on Earth's technological development. Proposals were quietly drafted to limit the kind of technology humans could legally explore. The humans sensed this shift. They felt the way conversations became more careful, how friendly ambassadors now asked more pointed questions, how trade agreements suddenly included more conditions and clauses. Their delegation understood that they were being watched like hawks, but instead of panicking, they adapted. They played the political game, giving just enough information to appear cooperative, while keeping the most important discoveries locked away in deep vaults. In the shadows, human intelligence services began running their own operations. They infiltrated conquered data networks, monitored alien communications, and used old Earth-based hacking techniques combined with newly decoded systems from their ancestors. Slowly, they built their own picture of how the galaxy viewed them. What they found both worried and motivated them. Several powerful species had already begun forming secret pacts to monitor and contain Earth if necessary. Some even ran military simulations predicting conflicts 50 years into the future. Back on Earth, ordinary people didn't know the full truth. They celebrated technological breakthroughs, enjoyed alien trade goods, and watched as humanity expanded further into space. But beneath that excitement was quiet preparation. New training programs for pilots and scientists were launched. Underground facilities began producing prototype ships that were never announced to the conquered, and specialized exploration units were formed to travel to ancient sites hidden in remote parts of the galaxy. The feeling was like the calm before a storm. The galaxy and humanity were both smiling at each other on the surface, exchanging polite words, trade, and cultural events, but underneath, both sides were calculating, weighing strengths, and watching each other's every move. The tension became more visible during a Senate session when an alien delegate from a cautious species stood and openly questioned Earth's recent activities. He asked why human ships were mapping old ruins in the outer rim without notifying the conquered, why their engine technology had advanced so fast, and why they were storing ancient artifacts instead of sharing them. The human ambassador responded smoothly, saying that Earth had the right to understand its own past, and that all their actions were legal under Concord law. The room filled with murmurs, some supportive, others suspicious. After that session, human diplomats began receiving fewer invitations to informal meetings. Some trade negotiations stalled without explanation, and Concord patrols increased their presence near human exploration routes. It was clear that the friendly atmosphere of the early days was fading. Something bigger was taking shape. But humanity wasn't backing down in private. They had decided that understanding their ancient legacy was more important than pleasing the conquered. They knew that knowledge was power, and power could be the difference between survival and domination. While alien governments whispered and watched, humanity quietly prepared for whatever might come next. The galaxy had thought of Earth as a small player, a newcomer eager to learn. Now they were beginning to wonder if that newcomer carried the weight of an old giant, waking up after a long sleep. The air was heavy with suspicion, curiosity, and a growing sense that something significant was about to happen. No one could say exactly when, but everyone could feel it. A shift in the balance was beginning, and neither side could fully control it anymore. The Outer Rim had always been a place of mystery. It was a vast and distant region on the edge of the galaxy, far away from the safety and control of the conquered for centuries. Explorers had spoken of abandoned stations, silent ruins, and strange signals that seemed to echo from nowhere. Many called it the ghost frontier. Some ships went in and never came back. Others returned with broken engines, scrambled data, and terrified crews who refused to speak about what they had seen. The conquered mostly avoided this area, marking it as unstable and dangerous. But to humanity, it had become the key to their past. After months of decoding ancient star maps and signals, a human exploration fleet quietly set course for one of the star systems marked in the old records. The mission was kept secret from the conquered officially. The ships were registered as deep space survey vessels collecting mineral data, but inside their cargo holds were advanced scanners, ancient devices recovered from Earth, and specialized teams trained to explore unknown ruins. The fleet consisted of 3 ships led by the vessel Horizon, a sleek, modern ship equipped with both new human technology and modified systems based on ancient schematics. As the fleet entered the Outer Rim, the stars seemed to grow dimmer. The usual bright lights of space were replaced by thick fields of cosmic dust and strange gravitational waves that made navigation difficult. The crew felt a strange tension, as if they were stepping into forbidden territory. The instruments picked up faint energy signatures ahead, the same ones that matched the mysterious signal received months earlier. They followed the trail carefully, weaving through asteroid belts and debris fields until they finally saw it. Floating in the darkness was a massive structure, larger than any human space station and older than anything they had ever seen. It looked like a ring made of black metal, its surface cracked and covered in glowing blue veins that pulsed slowly. Like a heartbeat, parts of it were broken, massive chunks missing, but the core remained intact. It hung silently in space like a sleeping giant. The crew stared in awe, They realized they were looking at something that had been built long before the Concorde even existed. The Horizon sent a team inside through one of the broken docking tunnels. The interior was dark and cold, yet the walls were smooth and clean, as if they had been preserved for thousands of years. Strange symbols covered the corridors, the same patterns found in Earth's underground ruins. Lights flickered to life as the humans moved deeper. Their footsteps echoed in the hollow chambers. Scanners showed that the structure still had a functioning power core deep inside, though it was in a dormant state. Back at the Concorde core, a patrol fleet noticed the human expedition's presence in the outer rim. Their navigation records showed no official mission registered in that sector. Suspicion turned into alarm. The Concorde immediately dispatched a fast response patrol to investigate. Their commanders wanted to know why humans were exploring a forbidden zone without permission. They reached the system just as the human team inside the ancient structure made a shocking discovery. Deep within the central chamber, the exploration team found what looked like a control hub, a vast room with floating platforms, glowing interfaces, and a huge sphere in the center. When one of the ancient devices brought from Earth was connected to a terminal, the entire structure came alive. Light surged through the walls. The black metal glowed blue, and the station emitted a low, powerful hum that shook nearby asteroids. The crew stared as holographic images of star maps and strange figures filled the room. They realized they had activated something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Outside, the patrol ships arrived and demanded immediate access. They sent sharp messages accusing the humans of trespassing and potentially endangering the galaxy. The Horizon tried to explain, but before negotiations could begin, the station reacted. Massive shield barriers formed around it, energy signatures spiked, and long-dormant defense systems activated automatically. Turrets and drones emerged from hidden panels, surrounding both the human and alien ships. For a moment, everyone froze, unsure of what would happen next. The patrol captain ordered the human fleet to stand down and surrender control of the structure. But the humans refused. They argued that the station was connected to their ancient civilization, and they had the right to explore it. The argument quickly turned into a tense standoff, both sides with weapons powered but not fired. The energy readings from the station climbed higher. Strange pulses spread through the system, reaching nearby stars and satellites. It was as if the structure was sending a message into the void. Back on Earth, news of the incident reached human leaders, who scrambled to respond. They feared that if a battle broke out, it would give the Concorde the excuse to place strict controls on all human activity. Military fleets were quietly put on alert, while diplomats rushed to open emergency communication channels. In the Galactic Senate, alien delegates began demanding explanations. Some called for immediate sanctions against Earth, claiming humanity had awakened a dangerous weapon. Others urged patience, saying the situation needed to be understood first. Meanwhile, inside the station, the human exploration team uncovered a fragment of an ancient log. It described the structure as a beacon, part of a network created by the old human empire to monitor and protect the galaxy. The log ended with a single chilling line: "When the beacon wakes, the sleepers will return." No one knew what it meant, but the timing was too perfect. The station was awake and the galaxy was watching. The standoff in space lasted for hours, neither side willing to back down. Finally, the station itself intervened. It sent out a blinding flash of light, disabling all ships' weapon systems temporarily. Then it opened its main gate and transmitted a message in both ancient human language and Concorde standard. The message was simple: the heirs have returned. The patrol ships were forced to retreat, their commanders too shocked to continue. The human fleet stayed behind, continuing to study the structure now that they had gained access to its systems. When the news of the Outer Rim incident spread, the entire galaxy was shaken. No one could ignore humanity anymore. They had activated something ancient and powerful, something that even the Concorde didn't fully understand. Some species began to fear them. Others began to respect them. But everyone agreed on one thing: humanity was no longer just a curious newcomer. They had become a wild card, a force connected to an ancient legacy that might be greater than anyone had imagined. The Outer Rim incident became the turning point. From that day forward, the balance of trust between humanity and the Concorde changed. Eyes that had once watched with mild curiosity now watched with caution and calculation. Humanity had touched something that had slept for ages, and whatever it was now awake. The Outer Rim incident had shaken the galaxy. The activation of the ancient station had spread like wildfire through every corner of the Concorde. No one could deny the truth anymore. Humanity had awakened something that had been sleeping for thousands of years. Rumors spread fast. Some said the humans had found an ancient weapon. Others whispered that the station was a throne, waiting for its rightful rulers to return. The Galactic Senate called for an emergency session. Ambassadors from every species arrived, their faces serious and tense. Something big was about to happen. The human delegation walked into the Senate chamber, knowing that the entire galaxy was watching. For years they had listened, observed, and learned quietly, but now they stood at the center of everything. The floating platforms slowly took their places around the glowing sphere of light, which pulsed faster than usual, reflecting the tension in the room as the session began. The conquered speaker demanded a full explanation. Why had the humans gone to the outer rim without permission? How had they activated the station, and what did they know about it? The questions came one after another, sharp and suspicious. The lead human ambassador stepped forward, their voice calm but firm. They explained that the station had responded to ancient human technology, that it was part of a network built by their ancestors long before the Concorde existed. They told the Senate that humanity had found records, ruins, and evidence on Earth proving that their species had once been part of an ancient galactic civilization. They admitted that at first they had been just as surprised as everyone else, but the more they uncovered, the more the truth became clear as the ambassador spoke. Holographic images filled the chamber. These were projections taken from the station's logs. They showed star maps glowing with lines of light. Connecting hundreds of systems, they showed great cities floating in space, human ships traveling across the stars, and fleets working alongside alien species that no one in the current Concorde recognized. The Senate chamber fell silent. The images were too detailed to be faked, too ancient to belong to any current power. They were witnessing a history that had been lost to time. Then the ambassador revealed the most shocking part. The Concorde itself had unknowingly been built on top of the remains of the old human empire. The hyperspace lanes, the stargates, and even some of the Senate's oldest traditions all traced back to that forgotten civilization. The galaxy had simply moved on after the fall. New species rose, new alliances were formed, and history slowly erased the memory of those who came before, until all that remained were myths and broken signals. For the first time, the aliens began to understand. Earth wasn't just a newcomer, it was the birthplace of something far older. Their new friends were actually the distant descendants of the very people who had once built the foundations of their galactic society. Some delegates were stunned. Others were frightened, a few were even angry, accusing humanity of hiding the truth. The human ambassador responded that they hadn't known the full truth themselves until recently, and everything they uncovered was being pieced together step by step, just like everyone else. The speaker of the Concorde asked a single question that hung heavily in the air. If your people once ruled the stars, what do you plan to do now that you remember? The human ambassador paused before answering. They said humanity did not seek to conquer, but to understand and reclaim its rightful place in history. They wanted cooperation, but not as children learning from their elders. They wanted to stand as equals, as the heirs of a legacy that belonged not just to them, but to the galaxy as a whole. Reactions across the chamber were mixed. Some species clapped their claws, hands, or appendages in support, believing this revelation could lead to a new age of shared knowledge. Others whispered among themselves, suspicious and afraid, worried that humanity's return as an ancient power could destabilize the fragile balance of the Concorde. A few powerful factions saw opportunity, thinking that aligning with Earth might give them advantages in the future. Alliances were already shifting even as the session continued. Outside the chamber, the news exploded across the galaxy. Broadcasts showed the holographic images to billions of viewers. Entire populations were stunned to learn that the history they knew was incomplete. Alien historians rushed to their archives, digging for traces of early human contact that they may have overlooked. And to their surprise, many found old records that suddenly made sense. Strange ruins on distant worlds now matched human symbols. Forgotten trade routes lined up perfectly with the star maps shown in the Senate. Humanity's story was no longer a myth, it was proven fact. Back on Earth, people watched the news with pride and wonder. For generations, they had seen themselves as explorers trying to catch up to the stars. Now they realized they were returning to a place they had once known. Monuments lit up, cities celebrated, and children spoke of becoming star builders like their ancestors. Governments received thousands of messages from citizens volunteering to join future exploration missions. The feeling was like a long-lost family finally remembering who they were. But not everyone celebrated. In some corners of the galaxy, powerful leaders met in secret. They discussed what this revelation meant for the Concord's balance. If humanity truly held the key to ancient technologies and forgotten star networks, they could rise faster than any species before. Some saw them as potential allies. Others saw them as a threat that needed to be controlled before it was too late. Plans were made quietly, far away from the public eye. Meanwhile, human scientists continued to study the station in the outer rim. They discovered that the beacon was not just a passive relic. It was a hub that could communicate with other similar stations scattered across the galaxy. They theorized that if all beacons were reactivated, a vast ancient network could come back online, a network that had once united countless systems under human leadership. This possibility filled some with hope and others with fear. In the following weeks, the Senate drafted new policies for cooperation. Some species called for joint expeditions with humans to explore the old sites. Others pushed for restrictions to keep the ancient technology under Concord control. Humanity pushed back firmly, making it clear that they would not allow their heritage to be taken away. They were willing to work with others, but not as followers, as equals. The revelation had changed everything. The Concord could no longer treat Earth as a junior member. The galaxy now saw humanity not through the lens of what they were, but what they had been and what they could become again, beneath the surface of diplomatic smiles. A quiet power struggle had begun. Humanity stood in the center of it, carrying the weight of a forgotten empire on its shoulders. The stars that had once seemed distant and unreachable now felt familiar, like a home they were slowly remembering. And as the Senate adjourned that day, every species knew that the future had shifted. The revelation was not just about the past. It was a warning and a promise humanity had returned, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The revelation changed everything. After the Senate session, the galaxy was no longer the same. Humanity's true history was no longer hidden, and their place among the stars had shifted overnight. The species once seen as newcomers were now viewed as the descendants of an ancient power. Some saw them as potential leaders. Others saw them as a dangerous unknown. Whispers filled every corridor of the Concord core. Secret messages flew between factions, and the balance of power quietly began to tilt. On Earth, people celebrated for days. Cities lit up with glowing lights. Children dressed as explorers and ancient star builders. And for the first time in centuries, humanity felt united under a single purpose. They were no longer just dreamers reaching for the stars. They were heirs returning home. Governments quickly began forming new alliances, creating plans for exploration, technology development, and defense. Research centers worked day and night to decode the remaining ancient devices found in ruins and stations. In orbit around the planet, massive new shipyards began construction, blending modern human technology with ancient schematics. Ships were no longer built just for travel and trade. They were designed for endurance, speed, and power. Fleets were quietly expanded. Exploration vessels were sent to distant star systems marked on the old maps. Many of these systems had been forgotten by the Conquered, but for humanity, they were like keys unlocking doors to their lost empire. As these missions succeeded, humanity's influence grew not through conquest, but through knowledge and action. Meanwhile, in the Galactic Senate, a quiet struggle was taking shape. Some alien factions welcomed the change. Believing that humanity's return could bring a new golden age, they offered partnerships, technology sharing, and cultural exchange, hoping to stand beside the new rising power. Others were uneasy. They remembered stories of old civilizations that had grown too strong, too fast, and caused chaos. Meetings behind closed doors turned into heated arguments. Should the Concord embrace humanity fully or keep them under watch? Several powerful species formed a secret council. They feared that humanity's ancient technology could shift the balance too far. Their spies tried to infiltrate human programs, hacking into research networks and intercepting deep space transmissions. But human intelligence agencies had grown sharper too. They caught many of these attempts, quietly feeding false information to keep their enemies confused. They knew they were being watched, and they used that knowledge to their advantage. At the same time, humanity was building real alliances. Smaller civilizations that had always been overshadowed by the major powers saw an opportunity. They admired Earth's rise and the way humans carried themselves. These smaller species began joining human-led expeditions, trading resources and knowledge in return for protection and shared discoveries. Slowly, humanity became a center of activity, not because they demanded it, but because others were drawn to their growing strength and legacy. The beacons in the outer rim continued to awaken one by one. Each time a new one came online, ancient star lanes lit up, opening faster and safer routes through space. Trade began to shift toward these newly activated corridors, giving humans control over key navigation points. Species that once dismissed Earth as irrelevant now found themselves relying on human routes for commerce and travel. Power was moving without a single shot being fired. Inside the Senate chamber, the speaker called for unity, urging everyone to adapt to the new reality. They spoke of cooperation and shared history, but behind the speeches, the old powers were nervous. For centuries, they had held control. Now humanity's return was forcing them to reconsider everything. No single law had been broken. No war had been started, but the galaxy could feel the change like a storm approaching over calm waters. Human leaders played their role carefully. They didn't demand thrones or declare dominance. They spoke of partnership, respect, and rebuilding what had once united the stars, but their actions spoke louder than their words. They expanded steadily, reactivated technology that no one else understood, and positioned themselves as gatekeepers of ancient knowledge. While others debated and hesitated, humanity simply moved forward, confident and focused. Not all reactions were peaceful in the shadows. A group of alien extremists attacked a human outpost near one of the newly activated beacons. Hoping to destroy it before it could grow stronger, the attack was repelled quickly. The human fleet arrived faster than expected thanks to their restored star routes. The extremists were captured and their sponsors were quietly exposed. This event sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humanity was not defenseless anymore. They were watching too, and they could protect what was theirs. Among ordinary people across different worlds, opinions were divided. Some admired humanity's courage and history. Others feared that the return of such an ancient power could bring war. Still, curiosity was stronger than fear for many. Humans began receiving invitations from schools, universities, and cultural centers across the galaxy to share their rediscovered knowledge. Human music, art, and literature spread rapidly. Their culture became fashionable and inspiring, just as it might have been in the old days in deep space. Human explorers discovered a massive archive station, older than the Outer Rim beacon. It contained records written in both ancient human language and others that had long disappeared. The logs told the story of a united galactic network led by humans, not through force but through innovation, exploration, and the promise of shared growth. It spoke of an age where dozens of species had worked together to build wonders across the stars. It also warned of a great silence that came after. When the network collapsed for reasons still unclear, these discoveries added to humanity's growing moral authority. They weren't just claiming power. They were showing the galaxy that their ancestors had built something worth remembering. Slowly, fear began to mix with respect, and respect turned into influence. Even species that disliked humans had to admit their achievements were reshaping the galactic stage. Within a few short years, humanity had gone from being silent observers to key players. Trade routes shifted, political alliances changed, and old powers began adjusting their strategies. The Concord was no longer the same. It had to evolve to include this newly awakened force. As Earth's fleets patrolled the stars and explorers mapped ancient systems, people began to understand that this was not about conquering the galaxy. It was about returning to it, reclaiming their role not as rulers, but as builders and connectors, just like their ancestors had once done. The stars that had seemed so far away were now part of their story again. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, thinking they were newcomers eager to learn. But the truth was far greater. They were the ancient power returning to a stage they themselves had built. A new balance of power had emerged, quiet but undeniable. The conquered was no longer the unquestioned center of authority. Earth now stood beside it, holding the keys to the past and the tools to shape the future. And somewhere in the depths of the awakened network, signals continued to pulse through space, old systems stirring after ages of silence, hinting that this was only the beginning. Humanity had risen again, and the galaxy was entering a new chapter that no one could fully predict. The stars were watching, and history was repeating itself, not with conquest but with return.